Radical Islam's #1 ally is right. And for proper identification purposes, I'm going to say this man's full name. The President of the United States of America, Barack Hussein Obama. That's right, don't get it twisted. He is Radical Islam's #1 ally. Why do I say that? I say it because, and let's take just what just happened in Paris for an example. Because I can give you thousands of examples, and I can have you here all day listening to this, but I gotta make these video blogs short and sweet to keep your attention. Paris attack. Conference in Turkey. Let's talk about what he didn't talk about, was Islam and Muslims. He talked a whole bunch about the GOP and Christians and us not being compassionate and blah, 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 blah. But did you ever hear him talk about radical Islam? No. We have never heard radical Islam come out of the mouth of that man. And we will never hear those words come out of the mouth of that man. You want to know why? Because he feels that radical Islam does not exist. Nothing can ruffle the feathers of Islam, because Islam is so precious. It's so dear to the heart of this Christian that we call Barack Hussein Obama. That's right. The Christian, the self-proclaimed Christian, doesn't want to tarnish the name of Islam by putting radical in front of it. He doesn't want to come to the grips of knowing that radical Islam is the #1 threat nationally in America and the #1 threat globally. And ISIS is the poster boy for radical Islam. What does ISIS stand for? The Islamic State in Syria. No, he wants to call it ISIL. Now he wants to call it Daesh. But radical Islam will never come out of the mouth of that man.
ISIL is not Islamic.
With that being said, with him not actually naming the #1 enemy of the world right now, radical Islam, he is their #1 ally. And to wrap this up for today, he is their #1 ally. This 16-month campaign, as I've said in the past, this 16-month campaign of going after ISIS has done nothing. We know for a fact that these bombings and these air raids have done nothing. Why? Because they're not even hitting ISIS at all. Empty warehouses and empty military installations and facilities is what these air raids that President Barack Hussein Obama has authorized our military to do. Barack Hussein Obama is radical Islam's #1 ally.
In order for us to defeat terrorist groups like ISIL and Al-Qaeda, is going to also require us to discredit their ideology, the twisted thinking that draws vulnerable people into their ranks. As I've said before, and I know our military leaders agree, this broader challenge of countering violent extremism is not simply a military effort. Ideologies are not defeated with guns, they're defeated by better ideas.
Why don't you wake up and smell what you're shoveling?
There are many, even in your own party, who think that ISIS is going to like your rhetoric, that your words are putting us in greater danger.
There are many, even in your own party, who think that ISIS is going to like your rhetoric, that your words are putting us in greater danger.
Mark Thiessen is a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a Washington Post columnist. He just wrote a column on this. Mark, so now it's 36% approve of Obama on foreign policy, just 29% approve of his handling in the Middle East. And you reported today on one thing that may be factoring in there. Tell us.
Absolutely. Well, this morning on Capitol Hill, Congressman Ed Royce, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, he revealed that for a year, Iraqi officials had been requesting, begging, pleading with the Obama administration to carry out drone strikes against ISIS, and that those repeated requests were all denied. So what that means is the Obama administration, one, was not caught by surprise. They were warned about this a long time ago. And two, they had a chance to stop ISIS when they were in staging areas in the Iraqi desert before they went into cities and took over these cities that were liberated with American blood and declared an Islamic State. We could have stopped this before it happened. Not only do we have the authorization of the Iraqi government to go in and carry out drone strikes, but they were begging us to do it, and according to Congressman Royce, those requests were turned down.
They were warning, according to Congressman Royce, they were warning, the Iraqi officials were, about this dangerous threat being posed by ISIS and where this was likely to go. This is August of 2013. It was January of 2014 that ISIS took control of Fallujah, and the president was asked about that by the New Yorker, and this is what he said. The analogy we use around here sometimes, and I think this is accurate, is if a JV team puts on Lakers uniforms, that doesn't make them Kobe Bryant. He had been warned repeatedly. They captured Fallujah, and he was out there saying in January, half a year after the warnings came and they were ignored or overruled, it's JV.
This is a huge story, and what it does is it puts responsibility for what's happening in Iraq squarely on the president's shoulders. He had a chance to stop this. The Iraqi government gave us the green light to carry out. One of the biggest obstacles to drone strikes is, will the government allow us to do it or not, the post-government. The Iraqis were begging us to do it. We had a chance to go in, and this is a president who, recall that the Obama administration leaked that he personally draws up kill lists for drone strikes. We're doing drone strikes in Pakistan, we're doing them in Yemen, we're doing them in East Africa. Why would we not do them in Iraq? I think the answer is because it would have been an admission of failure. It would mean that his withdrawal had led to the resurgence of terrorists, and he didn't want to admit that if he was carrying out drone strikes in Iraq. So he let the threat muster.
He reportedly bragged in another interview, quote, "I'm pretty good at killing people," but declined to do so when this terror group that is beheading Iraqis by the hundreds was on the rise. Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Megan.
Wow.
As your commander-in-chief, I will not commit you and the rest of our armed forces to fighting another ground war in Iraq.
Jack Keane, he's chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News military analyst. General, good to see you tonight. I mean, what do you make of the president? Now the White House trying to dial it back through Josh Earnest, but we heard it from the president's own lips. What do you make of the revelation that we have no strategy for dealing with this terror army?
Well, it's an extraordinary and stunning admission coming from a leader of the world's most powerful nation. And you know, as such, Megan, it's embarrassing also. As you pointed out in the introduction, we know a lot about ISIS. They reemerged in 2009 and 2010 in earnest in Iraq. They moved into Syria in a comprehensive way in 2011. They've been there for 3 years, taking control of territory. They were a growing menace every single month, increasing in territorial control and imposing their harsh governance. Our intel agencies have been watching them all this time. The Institute of the Study of War, we've tracked them on a daily basis. We've shared information with intelligence agencies, with the Department of State, with the Department of Defense. Everybody in our government in the national security business knows this organization and what a significant threat it is to the Middle East, which is attacking our vital interests and also to our country. We need a comprehensive strategy, and I fear that we may not get one.
The president, even though he uttered those words, seemed to then go on to outline what he's thinking right now. He suggested that, yes, we need to have a military presence there, and he's asked for recommendations from Chuck Hagel and General Dempsey on what that should be. He suggested that we needed to get new leadership in place in Iraq, which has now happened, because otherwise, we need the right political leadership in place. And he talked about building a coalition of forces, so it's not just the United States. And by the way, Secretary of State John Kerry is over there right now. Here is how the president outlined what he's thinking so far, and in particular, I'd like to get your thoughts on how he said, look, you know, we can do all the military stuff we want in the world, but it's not going to do anything unless we follow through and get a coalition. Listen to the president.
Our military is the best in the world. We can rout ISIS on the ground and keep a lid on things temporarily, but then as soon as we leave, the same problems come back again. This should be a wake-up call to Sunni, to Shia, to everybody, that a group like ISIS is beyond the pale. We've got to all join together, even if we have differences on a range of political issues, to make sure that they're rooted out.
How's that sound to you, General?
Well, I agree with much of that. The fact of the matter is we do need to lead a coalition, particularly from the region, but also with other allies. It has to transcend political, diplomatic, economic, and military. But you do have to go out there and attack them. You have to destroy what they have, and you have to wind up killing and capturing a lot of them. We've done this before. But the fact of the matter is we have to assist our allies there. The fact is, at Free Syrian Army, we should robustly arm them and train them and stop doing half measures, which we're currently doing. The people on the ground in Iraq that are going to lead this, so the Iraqi army will lead it with Peshmerga. Sunni tribal leaders will participate as they are in Anbar province, and also the Shia. Here's what we don't know though, Megan. We will lead the air strikes. I'm convinced we'll eventually get to do it. We'll have coalition partners doing it, and it will be effective. But we cannot defeat ISIS with those airstrikes alone. The only way you can do that is the combination of a ground force supported by air power. The ground force are going to be others that we are going to support, and we do not know if they're going to be effective. That is the unknown question here, and we're just going to have to see. And we don't know either how long it's going to take.
Why do you think the president said he has no strategy, given that he's clearly being briefed on all of this? There's no way General Dempsey doesn't have an idea of what to go in and do militarily.
I think he made that statement because he hasn't made a decision about what to do. And I think that was an honest reflection of that. I mean, I know for a fact that there's military campaign strategy that the Pentagon has that's been developed by Central Command Headquarters at Tampa, Florida. They have regional responsibility here, and along with that, obviously, they would also have a range of options. So inside the national security apparatus, I'm convinced there's a lot of thinking going on, but I believe he hasn't got it as involved as they are, and number two, he hasn't made any decisions, and I think that was an honest answer. He didn't have a strategy, and that is what is so embarrassing after all this time, that we're not conversant with this to the degree that we could really talk about it in some level of detail, even though he may not have made a final decision.
Sure, he'll be mulling it over at the fundraisers tomorrow. General, thank you. Joining me now, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, who's a Fox News strategic analyst. Ralph, the president's messaging was all over the board today on this, and meantime, his counterterrorism head, his defense secretary, his chairman of the Joint Chiefs all seem to be telling us the same thing, which is, yes, we do need to worry.
Well, Megan, I believe the president has isolated himself from his own allies at this point. For the intelligence community, sort of a final straw was when he tried to blame them for not alerting him about ISIS. When the intelligence community knows full well it's been doing all it could for well over a year to tell the president that, hey, they're coming and they're serious. And even Chuck Hagel, who's certainly been, when not a cipher, very loyal to Obama, he clearly gets it. Throughout the government, you've got people that see this as a very serious threat. They're trying to be loyal to the president, but they're finding they just can't be because this guy doesn't get it. And, you know, today was another debacle where he said, Obama sounds strong, and then he backs off and says, well, we just got to get this to a manageable level with Islamic State Caliphate. You know, you can't manage hardcore fanatical terrorists. It's like trying to manage a barrel of rattlesnakes, for God's sakes. And then, God help us, you had Joe Biden ranting about how we'll follow ISIS to the gates of hell. Well, we won't even cross the border into Syria. This is an administration that relies on rhetoric for everything. And Megan, you know, it struck me today that one thing, President Obama and Vladimir Putin do have one thing in common. You can't pay any attention to what they say, watch what they do, or, in our president's case, what he fails to do.
Here's the thing that I think concerns a lot of Americans. The messaging, it's all over the board. That's clear. They give us a different message every day, and it depends on who. Even the president is giving us a different message every day. But his counterterrorism officials and those who are supposed to be keeping us safe, they seem to be sticking to be concerned, be very concerned. Then we see them get woodshedded a little bit behind, closed doors by the White House, and they come out, they soften it a little, and then they once again go back to what appears to be their truth, which is be concerned. The thing that I think a lot of Americans are worried about, Ralph, is what is the truth? I mean, we're coming up on the 9/11, the 13-year mark from the 9/11 attacks. What is the truth? And does the president have a truth that he believes about this group?
Well, that's the last question you ask is impossible for us to know, because none of us can really get inside this president's head. My personal view is that he has a deep psychological aversion to bearing responsibility, to making any decisions. But as far as what's the truth about ISIS and the threat on the anniversary of 9/11, what we do know is they want desperately to hit us. Islamist terrorists all want to hit us, and there's no better day than the anniversary of 9/11. On the other hand, our government doesn't get credit when it does deserve it. Our counterterrorist forces, our elements from Homeland Security, the intelligence community, to New York City cops have done a remarkable job of keeping us safe. But the threat is growing. It is metastasizing, and our president is doing nothing. And at some point, even the best efforts of New York's finest are not going to be able to prevent that horrible attack.
Ralph, thank you.
Here with reaction to all this and more, nationally syndicated radio talk show host, the great one, Mark Levin. JV, boots on the ground, no boots on the ground. One part of the administration is saying destroy, then we'll manage, then international coalitions. Have you ever witnessed such incoherence in your life, Mark?
No, we're surrounded by knuckleheads, and the problem is they're supposed to be protecting the country. First of all, it's September 17th, so happy Constitution Day, or what's left of the Constitution Day. What the House has done, let me just say, this is extraordinary. They've given the president authority to train 5,000 moderate whatevers in Syria. I guess they know who's what. This is very interesting to me, Sean. So the president doesn't think he needs congressional approval, declaration of war, or what have you, to bomb, but apparently he needs congressional approval to arm 5,000 whatevers. This is very odd. I just want to point this out. You actually have a revolt going on with the top generals in Obama. I'm not talking about tanks pulling up to the White House and so forth. These men are trying to communicate to the American people that they are military men, and we cannot defeat this enemy unless we use all of our armed forces and armed services. That's number one. Number two, Obama does not view this as a military action. He keeps telling us it's not a war, it's not a war. For him, the truth is it's about politics. It's about containing this issue politically for him so he can focus on fundamentally transforming America. And this is a very serious matter to understand. So the generals and the military see this quite differently than our very political president, who really doesn't want to defeat this enemy. Or he would go to Congress, get a declaration of war, unleash hell on these cockroaches, and then get out. Instead, he speaks to our military men and tells them, don't worry, no combat boots on the ground. He has said it 1,000 times so every one of our enemies in every single language can understand under this so-called commander-in-chief, he has no intention of defeating them, period.
All right, look, I agree with you it's political, but I'm more cynical maybe even than you are. I think this is just to get past the midterm election. I don't think it's any deeper than that. I don't think this president has any intention of fighting the war that they've declared against us.
I think it's to get past the Obama administration. He just doesn't want to deal with this. He sees his numbers are low, so he'll do the absolute minimum. I mean, the American people, he says he's brought this wonderful coalition together, but they're keeping it secret. Have you ever heard anything so stupid in your life? There is no coalition. And then he's talking about training 5,000 moderate whatevers, 5,000 against 35,000. Who are these 5,000? Then he says we're going to use our Air Force, but we have to limit civilian casualties. Well, how are we going to use our Air Force, attack the enemy where it is in Syria, and limit civilian casualties? These generals, the Joint Chief of Staff and the rest of them, they see this as the disaster that it is. So do we.
All right, then frankly, for Bob Gates to speak out as he did, I think speaks volumes. What about the rest of these generals? They're going to be in charge of this thing, and then they, Chairman Dempsey said, well, I'll go back to the president. The president's not going to change his mind about boots on the ground. So that means we're destined for failure. That means that the war will be engaged against us. Prime Minister Netanyahu said first, there was the master race, now there's the master faith. I don't think the president has a clue about the caliphate. What does that mean for the average American when these guys get here?
I honestly don't think he gives a damn, as hard as that is to believe. How else do you explain him not securing the southern border? How else do you explain to him being on vacation while this whole thing is breaking out? How else do you explain sending 3,000 troops to Liberia and other places to fight Ebola while we don't have 3,000 troops at his direction on the border and so forth and so on? The fact of the matter is, if this is a war and we want victory, we can defeat them, we can wipe these cockroaches out. If he wants to do something short of that, obviously he can, but I think it's time for Mr. Boehner and Mr. McConnell and people to rise up and say, we want to know if you want victory. If you're going to call this a war, we will do a declaration of war, but we're not going to piddle around like this for political reasons.
But Mark, we watched as we've lost 4,000 men in Iraq. They shed their blood, they gave great sacrifice, others lost their limbs. And then city after city fell and the president did nothing. Why would anyone be convinced that he's serious about dealing with it now after the fact?
Well, we're not. And I want to say something now that you brought that up, because that's hugely important, and I know a lot of Gold Star families. I, on behalf of many people watching, many people in this country, want to apologize to you. I want you to know that your sons and daughters are heroes. They did exactly the right thing. I want to apologize to you for this phony commander-in-chief who cut and run, and as a result helped build up this enemy, this ISIS, ISIL, Schmeisel, whatever the hell it is, these terrorists, these cockroaches that we're now having to deal with, or should deal with, once and for all. And you know what? It just amazes me. Do we want to win wars anymore? Because we know how to win them. We remember how we won World War II. If this enemy is as serious as an enemy as the Secretary of Defense and the head of the Joint Chiefs and everybody else knows them to be, then we have to attack them where they are. And unfortunately, that's in Syria.
All right, the great one, Mark Levin, nationally syndicated radio talk shows. Thanks for being with us, Mark.
You said that the U.S. cannot kill our way out of this war, that the U.S. needs to go after the root causes that lead these young men, mostly men, some women, to go and join ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab or these terrorist groups. Give us a little perspective of what you were talking about.
Well, absolutely, and I'm not the first person to say something like this. Military commanders that we've had throughout many years here fighting this war on terrorism have said the exact same thing, that in the short term, when there's a threat like ISIL, we will take direct military action against these terrorists. We have done that. We are doing that in Iraq and in Syria. But longer term, we have to look at how we combat the conditions that can lead people to turn to extremism. If you think about, if there's a radical jihadi on the internet who's putting out hateful videos, that's powerful and dangerous, right? But if there are 10,000 men in a country who are willing to blow themselves up because of what that person says on the internet, that's much more dangerous. So how do you get at those 10,000 people? How do you get them not to pick up the AK-47 and instead do something more productive and positive with their life? That's what we're trying to get at this summit, looking at the long-term problem, not just the short-term one.
So you suggested that maybe if you find these young men jobs, they might not become terrorists, right?
Well, I think that's a gross oversimplification. What we've talked about is there are things like good governance in countries where if there is not good governance, it can create a vacuum and a space for terrorist organizations to recruit and get people to their cause. We've seen that in Libya. That's the perfect example right now, where there's a lack of governance. You've had young men attracted to this terrorist cause. Where there aren't other opportunities, we've seen this, in a number of places around the Middle East and around the world. Unfortunately, unfortunately, people turn to terrorism sometimes. So how do you get at that root causes? That's really the bigger point of this week's summit.
But you know, of course, that some of the best-known terrorists out there came from wealth and privilege, with higher education, degrees, whether Mohammed Atta or bin Laden himself.
Absolutely. And look, countering violent extremism takes on a variety of different ways you can do that here. Part of it is military. Absolutely. We are taking direct action against ISIL in Iraq and in Syria. But look, if we look around the world and say longer term, we cannot kill every terrorist around the world, nor should we try. How do you get at the root causes of this? Look, it might be too nuanced an argument for some, like I've seen over the past 24 hours, some of the commentary out there, but it's really the smart way that Democrats, Republicans, military commanders, our partners in the Arab world think we need to combat.
So just to be precise, I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the critics who have been out there.
I'm happy
you said it's important to find these guys jobs so they don't become terrorists. Explain what you meant.
Where there are places around the world where there's a lack of governance, a lack of economic opportunity. President George W. Bush talked about poverty being one of the drivers that leads people to extremism. Where there are lacking in these kinds of opportunities, we need to talk about how to make that different, how to help our partners around the world give young men in that vulnerable age group a different path in life, show them that there's a different chance for them than joining a terrorist organization. Again, it's one part of it, Wolf, but this is a really comprehensive way of looking at how you combat extremism, and it's not one that fits into a soundbite sometimes, as I've seen over the last 24 hours, but it's a really important piece of this.
And the reason was 24 hours ago, you said the issue of jobs, find these guys jobs, they might not become terrorism, so there's been some buzz out there, some criticism of you as a result. How are you dealing with it?
I don't read it.
Okay.
If I were ISIS, I wouldn't be afraid right now. I didn't figure there's no existential threat to these people. They can keep finding places where they can hold executions and putting the camera work together, getting their props ready, and killing people for show. And nothing we do right now seems to be directed at stopping this.
Well, I think there's a few stages here. Right now what we're doing is trying to take their leaders and their fighters off the battlefield in Iraq and in Syria. That's really where they flourish.
Are we killing enough of them?
We're killing a lot of them, and we're going to keep killing more of them. So are the Egyptians, so are the Jordanians. They're in this fight with us. But we cannot win this war by killing them. We cannot kill our way out of this war. We need, in the longer term, medium and longer term, to go after the root causes that leads people to join these groups, whether it's lack of opportunity for jobs.
We're not going to be able to stop that in our lifetime or 50 lifetimes. There's always going to be poor people. There's always going to be poor Muslims. And as long as there are poor Muslims, the trumpet's blowing. They'll join.
And I noticed you started your show today quoting Marie Harf, who used to work for me in the public affairs shop at CIA. And I think Marie would want to take a mulligan on how she said what she said 2 days ago. But I think the thought is this. Unless you change the conditions on the ground, you get to kill people forever. So in addition to applying military force here, Joe, we've got to work with our friends in the area to very boldly take on some of the issues that create this phenomenon.
Marie, General Michael Hayden was our guest earlier this morning, and he said he expects you'd want a mulligan for those comments. What's your response? Because I'm not sure.
Well, you worked. General Hayden said you all worked together.
We did.
So do you agree with your former boss or not? That's a tough question, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure I would take a mulligan on this one, but I think he went on to say something I would agree with, that, look, in the short term, and I said this on Hardball the other night, we are killing them, and we will continue killing ISIS terrorists that pose a threat to us. We're very good at that. I mean, General Hayden can speak to that better than anyone. But in the longer term, and this isn't specific to ISIL, military commanders, politicians of both parties, counterterrorism experts all agree that if you're going to prevent terrorist groups from spreading to other places and getting more recruits, you have to look at the root causes that can lead people to extremism. You have to do all of it. You have to take them on militarily, but you have to look at things like governance, like opportunity, so these groups aren't able to get more people to their cause. Absolutely.
Mike Barnicle.
All right. Among all of the stupid things that I think I have heard about radical Islam, the State Department jobs program has to be ranked the highest among them. I mean, because if that's their mentality, Colonel, then maybe we should give people free housing, terrorist housing, and maybe we should get them Ferraris and Obamacare. I've seen a lot of terrorists on TV that need dental work, maybe free dental care. Maybe that'll make them like us, because that seems to be the mindset. What's your reaction to that comment?
Well, let's really unpack what Marie Harf said. And Sean, Marie Harf is Exhibit A for the comprehensive failure of the U.S. educational system. That woman has a master's degree in international relations from the University of Virginia. Moms and dads, save your money. Now, what she was saying today about jobs, terrorists just need jobs. Then we give them union cards and a path to citizenship. I mean, Osama bin Laden was wealthy. Major Hassan, the Fort Hood butcher, he had a job, as I recall. He's a major in the Army. Do you think the guy in Copenhagen this last weekend, when he pulled the trigger trying to kill a cartoonist and as many other Danes as he could, was he screaming jobs, jobs, jobs? No, he was screaming Allahu Akbar. I mean, this is sheer idiocy. But the other thing she said in the same interview is, we can't kill our way out of a war. Hey, Marie, war is about killing. You get out of wars by killing enough of the other guys so that they either quit or they're gone. They're dead, they're gone, they're finished.